Choosing Home by ginnyrules27, Chapter 48. I don't know why you're dragging me to see this, Shayla griped as Lachlan pulled her towards Hell Hall. It's just another pointless royal event, only this one doesn't even impact us. Just some snooty, bratty princesses getting magical gifts. Stop your complaining, Shayla, Lachlan scoffed. You're starting to sound like someone from Borodon. Like Fred always said, it's better to be informed about your enemies rather than being caught by surprise by them because you didn't take the time to do the research. Shayla shook her head before pausing. Locke? You better pick up the pace if you want to use Hell Hall as the place you want to use to watch the christening. Why? Because your brothers surprisingly had the same idea. Lachlan paused. After all, she and Shayla normally pretended like the male members of her family didn't exist. Nevertheless, she went ahead and looked to her right, where Shayla was pointing. Sure enough, her older twin brothers were making their way to Hell Hall. In fact, they were about to beat her to Hell Hall. Oh, no, you don't, Shayla growled, and the two girls began to sprint in an attempt to beat Gaston Jr. and Gaston III to the door of Hell Hall. They knew they didn't have to worry about Cruella. She was out with Gothel, and then would probably go to Maleficent's castle to watch the christening, just like she had done before King Beastie Jr.'s coronation. What are you doing here, Lachlan? Gaston Jr. spat at Lachlan's hand closed around the door handle. Same thing you are, apparently, Lachlan shot back, watching this pointless pageantry. Dad said Hell Hall is for legumes only. Gaston III said, Go find another spot to watch it. I am a legume. No, you're not. Otherwise Dad would call you his daughter, wouldn't he? Gaston Jr. taunted. Lachlan growled, and her hand went to pull out a dagger from her belt as she shoved it down any shock that her brothers were admitting that she was their sister. While her older brothers may have been allies of Fred's, it didn't mean she had to put up with that taunting. Though it was usually Strat or Fred who dealt with them. Probably because Fred didn't want to risk the Lagoon boys taking what was his and having another boy end up having a fling with an angel. Lachlan, ignore them, Shayla said, shaking her head. We were here first, after all. Actually, Dad was here first. We were just getting snacks, Gaston Jr. said with a smirk as he held up a bag full of what looked Lachlan could only assume to be Borodon snack food. So run along. The door opened, preventing Lachlan from shooting off a scathing remark, as she looked up at her father for the first time since she was born. Gaston! Gaston! I didn't expect you to be on the stoop gossiping like old maids, Gaston Sr. told them, looking at his sons, giving his sons a look. They held us up, Gaston III said, shaking his head as he gestured to Shayla and Lachlan. We would have been here without incident otherwise, Dad. Gaston Sr. looked over at Lachlan and Shayla, smirking slightly. Well then, you've done well, boys. These two are pleasant to look at the very least. Especially the redhead. Who are we to refuse the company of? She's your daughter, you idiot, Shayla scoffed as she shoved past Gaston Sr. and plopped on the sofa in front of the television. As for me, none of you are my type. I prefer brains, thank you. There's no proof she is my daughter, Gaston Sr. said as Lachlan glowered at him. No legume would ever produce a daughter, and I'm not supporting a child who's not mine. Yeah, that's why you didn't stop the 9 of us from using the legume name, Lachlan muttered, as she shoved past her father to sit next to Shayla. Let's just watch the thing so I can get out of here. Shayla nodded and frowned as Gaston Jr. sat down next to her, more than likely due to the very limited seating. Try anything and you'll find you'll be missing a very important part of your body if you ever wish to reproduce, assuming you haven't already, she growled, pulling out one of her daggers and pointing it near Gaston Jr.'s groin. Yeah, don't scare me, Gaston Jr. scoffed. You want to try me? Lachlan shook her head but pulled out her dagger as Gaston III sat down next to her, effectively sandwiching the two girls together. Let's watch this pointless program, Gaston III muttered, as his father flipped on the television. Welcome to the christening of the century. I'm Snow White with all the blue carpet details, the royal said with a grin on her face, as Sheila and Lachlan both scoffed with displeasure. And here we are with Evie, the designer of so many of the dresses and suits you'll see today, Snow White said as Evie came on. Tell me, was it difficult to get so many amazing dresses and suits made while still making what looks to be one of your best dresses yet? Of course not, Evie said as Doug came up and wrapped his arm through hers. I had an amazing cheering squad, with my boyfriend Doug here, along with Lady Mal, Lady Uma, and of course my new assistants, Dizzy Tremaine and Gil Legume.
What? The three Gastons exclaimed. What is she thinking? Gil would never sew.
Gaston Jr. spat, glaring at the television as if it had personally offended him.
I mean, he's hopeless, but sewing is women's work.
Didn't he make your vests? That's what Gia said in any event, Lachlan said with a small smirk. Back when her sisters were still talking to her, before she joined Fred's gang, she used to get all the news about Gil and his crafts. Of course, she also used to see them firsthand, considering she used to be part of Gil's crew. Her, Aunt Brooke, and Sheila and Morgan. Strat had already left the crew by that time. Oh, here's the master seamster now. Evie grinned and pulled Gil toward her as he made his way down the blue carpet, the sound of Evie's voice pulling Lachlan out of her thoughts. Any words for your adoring public as Auradon takes in the amazing suits you've created?
Gil grinned. Well, I couldn't have done it if you hadn't let me work with you, Evie. You're amazing, after all.
Oh, it's nothing, really, Evie said with a smile. And who are you with tonight? Snow White asked Gil.
Gaston Jr. snorted. $5 says he's there with Uma and the hook brat. You honestly think Gil is manly enough to get a girl?
Gil! Macaria! Gil grinned and held out his hand as Macaria walked over to him and kissed him on the cheek.
Queen Snow, I am happy to say that I am here tonight with my girlfriend, Macaria of Olympus, as she looks even more stunning than I thought possible in one of Evie's designs.
Flattery will get you everywhere, Gil, Macaria said with a smile as she brushed some of Gil's hair out of his eyes.
Lachlan couldn't help but cackle at the sight of her brother's and father's shocked expressions. They honestly looked like someone had whacked them over their head with the gangplank from The Lost Revenge. Still think Gil can't get a girl? Somehow he managed to land a godling to pair off with. Gaston Sr. looked almost impressed. It's a shame he's not more of a man, even after going to Auradon. Sewing? He won't last long with a godling. They want power, after all.
Uh-huh, Sheila scoffed, shaking her head. Never mind the fact that Gil's somehow an ally of the murderer who's slated to be the Queen of Auradon once she's married. There's no more power than that. Oh, she hated the fact that she was defending Gil, seeing as he was a rat adjacent, since he was still under the rat's protection. But if it was a choice between defending the blonde idiot or agreeing with the raven-haired one, the blonde won every time.
Oh, right, forgot you former rangers call Mal that.
Gaston III snorted. That's what she did! Fred didn't deserve to be turned to ash.
Know your place, Gaston Sr. ordered. If I wanted to hear a woman complain, I would have spent time with Cruella, Gothel, and Medusa.
She says hi, by the way, Lachlan taunted, but Gaston Sr. ignored her. As he always did, but Lachlan was used to that. Besides, it's not like her mother actually sent a pass on a message to Gaston. Madame Medusa probably had no idea where Lachlan was, which was how Lachlan liked it. I'm being told that it's time to wrap this up, as everyone has started to proceed to go into the cathedral, where the three lovely princesses will be given their christening gifts, Snow White said, pulling everyone's attention back to the screen. Let's go inside! Lachlan and Sheila shook their heads as the camera switched to the inside of the cathedral, their eyes narrowing as they could see Mal standing next to Ben and the fairy godmother.
What is she doing there? Lachlan growled. She should be ashamed for what she did to Fred. Again with the complaining. Gaston Jr. rolled his eyes. Freddy was more dumb than LeFou if he honestly thought he could attack Auradon without backup.
You're not exactly one to talk about intelligence, Sheila muttered.
Gaston Jr., though, sat up and stared at the screen as Belle appeared.
standing next to Beast and holding a young girl, who could only be one of the 3 aforementioned princesses. I didn't know Belle had another child. Didn't an announcement go out that said she and Beast adopting a baby? Shayla muttered to Lachlan. Remember, he doesn't approve of reading. Lachlan muttered back. And you want his acknowledgement. Why, again? Shut it. Gaston Jr. shook his head. But, Dad, didn't you say that you wanted nothing to do with Belle after she miscarried because of how weak she... That must have been Beast's doing, Gaston Jr. said quickly, smacking his son over the head. The enchantment must have done something to the baby. After all, it was to be a girl, so naturally it'd be weaker than her son. That makes no sense, Shayla said, giving Gaston a look. Nothing he says ever does, Lachlan muttered. Welcome all, Fairy Godmother's voice quieted all conversation as they looked at the television once more. We're here today to christen the princesses Arabella Briar Rose, Paige Audrey Rose, and Genevieve Belle Labette. I invite the 3 good fairies to come forward, and for the princesses to come forward and get their gifts. Ooh, gifts! The brunette squealed, and Lachlan could only stare in shock. Those were Fred's kids! Or rather, the first 2 were. After all, wasn't Audrey's last name Rose? Granted, Claudine had also taken the last name Rose when she left the Angels, but neither Claudine nor Henry were royalty. How dare they! Shayla exclaimed. Those girls should have had the last name Frollo to honour Fred. That's what anyone who was loyal to him would have done. Yeah, you 2 are so loyal, huh? That's why you went over to Zevon's gang almost as soon as you heard Fred was dead. Gaston III chuckled as his brother high-fived him. Better to be a girl in a gang on the Isle than a girl without one, Lachlan muttered. We'll start with the Princess Genevieve, Fairy Godmother said as Belle stepped forward, still holding Genevieve in her arms. Lachlan frowned. There was something about that girl that looked familiar somehow. But she knew she hadn't seen her on the Isle. The black hair would have stood out, as not many people on the Isle had hair like that. Mainly Ginny Gothel came to mind. Or Gia. Gisela and Zevon both had black hair, but Zevon would have disemboweled any guy who managed to get Gisela pregnant. Hey, Dad, didn't you say only legumes had hair that colour? Gaston Jr. said, unknowingly picking up on Lachlan's thought. Legumes don't give birth to girls, Gaston Sr. told him. Look, wasn't one of your sisters pregnant when she left the Isle? Shayla whispered to Lachlan, who nodded. Unlike her brothers, Lachlan did have something of a brain in her head, and was able to put 2 and 2 together. Gia pregnant. The black legume hair. Belle and Beast adopting a young child so late in life. Lachlan knew that at that moment she was looking at her niece. But a niece she would never know. She tried to brush it off, act as if it didn't bother her. But she still felt a pang of something at the thought of the only family talking to her, being the 3 members who pretended she wasn't a member of their family, rather than her sisters and her little brother Gil, who were all separated from her by a barrier, and who were now living the high life in Borodon, alongside her cousin Brooke. Not that she cared. Not one bit. After all, Fred had always said that caring like that was for the weak. Why else would they have mocked Ryan for how he acted when his sister died at the dog stampede? Sweet princess, Flora said, pulling out her wand. My gift to you will be the gift of hope. Kinda a pointless gift. Who wants to be hopeful all the time? Shayla scoffed and scowled as Mal leaned over to whisper something in Ben's ear, causing the king to chuckle slightly. Kind princess, Fauna said, giving Genevieve a smile. My gift to you will be the gift of joy. Again. Pointless. Besides, it's Borodon. What's there to not be joyful about? Darling princess, Merryweather said, looking over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was going to make it so she'd have to overturn a curse again. My gift to you will be the gift of bravery. Finally, a gift that she would actually make sense on the aisle, Shayla said, shaking her head. So we have a stereotypical princess, huh? Hopeful, joyful, and brave. Next will be Princess Arabella, Fairy Godmother said as Ari stepped forward. Hiya, Auntie Flora, Ari said with a grin. Honestly, Shayla scoffed, how could Fred produce a prissy princess like that? Has to be Audrey's doing. Frollos aren't prissy. Lachlan nodded. Hello, sweet princess, Flora said, returning the smile. My gift to you will be the gift of grace. You really think Fred's kid is going to be a klutz? Lachlan scoffed. Please, that's more likely for Morgan's kid if she ever has one. Hiya, Auntie Fauna. Hello, darling princess, Fauna said, once more returning Ari's smile, just as Flora had done. My gift to you will be the gift of dance. Nice. Glad to see Fred's daughter is going to be a prissy princess. Shayla shook her head in disgust. Nothing about leadership or dagger throwing at all. Hiya, Auntie Merryweather. Hello, kind princess. Merryweather nodded and gave Ari a small smile of her own. My gift to you will be the gift of empathy. Okay, that one might be a good one, Shayla thought. After all, as great as Fred was, he wasn't the most empathetic of people. When my brother died, all he told me was that he wanted to stop me moping and go get revenge on the rats. Which I did. Quite well, if I say so myself. One more princess and then this pageantry is over, Gaston III sighed in relief. No one is making you watch this, you know. Lachlan shook her head. Also, you can count. At least if you're going to force yourself on us, at least all you could do is get us some snacks. Oh, are the mighty hunters unable to get food for themselves? Shayla mocked, and Lachlan cackled at the look on her brothers' faces. Flora floated over to Paige, who was held in Claudine's arms, much to Lachlan and Shayla's shock. Why is she holding Fred's daughter? He's probably rolling in his grave at the very thought. Darling princess, Flora said with a smile, my gift to you will be the gift of compassion, a gift that would be useless on the aisle. Kind princess, Fauna said, taking her turn to float up to Paige, my gift to you will be the gift of having animals understand you, so you will never be without companionship wherever you go. Who wants that? Bad enough the hyenas and other big cats can talk. Sweet princess, Merryweather said, grinning at Paige, though one might attribute the grin to the fact that no one had interrupted her gifts. My gift to you will be the gift of wit. Finally, something that sounds like it's deserving to be given to Fred's kid. Shayla nodded. And, hey, that's the last one, right? Gee, you'd know if you hadn't complained all through it like a typical woman, Gaston Jr. said as he rolled his eyes. Remember where this typical woman has a dagger pointing, Shayla said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the older Lagoon boy. Almost as if she had heard Shayla's comment, Fairy Godmother turned to address the crowd. I know you were all expecting 3 princesses to be christened, but Queen Aurora reminded me before the proceedings that there is another princess who deserves to receive a gift. She may not go by the title, but she is a princess by every definition, as she was adopted not too long ago by Queen Aurora and King Philip. Who on earth is she talking about? Lachlan scoffed. Princess Claudine Rose, please step forward. One could hear a pin drop in Hell Hall after Fairy Godmother said that. All Lachlan and Shayla could do was stare in shock as Claudine hesitantly handed Paige to Mal and stepped forward. All 3 good fairies floated over to her, Merryweather taking command rather than Flora. Heroic princess, Auradon cannot return all that was unfairly taken from you, Merryweather said. But perhaps this could be a start. Everyone watched as with a wave of all three good fairies as wands. Claudine was awash with an orange glow. What? What just happened? Claudine asked. What? What just happened? Claudine asked, her voice soft. You know, what's the point of giving her the gift during the televised event if they're not going to at least tell us? Shayla shook her head as Merryweather whispered something in Claudine's ear. It must have made an impact, though, as Claudine's eyes widened before becoming bright with unshed tears. She made her way over to Henry, who held her in his arms, his wedding band shining in the light of the cathedral. They got married. Since when was Henry interested in girls? He never had a fling on the aisle. Just because Henry's wearing a wedding ring doesn't mean he got married to the traitor. Shayla shook her head. Lachlan stood up. Well, that was about what I expected. Completely pointless and a waste of time. Come on, Shay. Let's go find Strat and see if we can't drag him away from whatever fling he managed to find. And before being around my brothers and father kill what left of my brain cells, she thought as the two former angels left Hell Hall, none of the Lagoon men bothering to even glance in their direction as they left, pretending the other didn't exist, just the way they liked it. After all, it had been that way for all of Lachlan's life. Just because they had a little parley didn't mean she expected any change. Even as she shoved down the last bit of hope her father would finally look her in the eye and call her his daughter. She was the last Lagoon girl on the aisle. There was no avoiding her. Yet, somehow, they were successful. She was probably the only woman the three Gastons actively avoided. Lachlan sighed as she made her way to the town centre with Shayla, looking for Strat if they happened to find him. As if unprompted, old memories came flooding back to her. Of Gil trailing after her after he found out about the Lagoon girls when he was a kid. An easy feat considering Aunt Claudette had 2 girls and Gil. Aunt Lirette had won the lottery, so to speak, having had the Gaston twins while Aunt Paulette struck out with having all girls. Lachlan could still remember the look on Gil's face the day she announced she was leaving to join Fred's gang, and that she was taking Brooke with her. They had never been the closest of siblings. Actually, Lachlan probably beat Harry in terms of how much she hated Gil. But that look of utter shock, of betrayal. No! Gil's a traitor to the Isle, and so are the others, Lachlan thought as she pushed down her thoughts. Thinking like that is only going to make you a target. They all had their choice, and they chose to side with the murderer, with the rats. Well, joke's on them, because I'm more powerful than they could ever dream. So, are we actually going to find Strat, or are we just wandering before we have to go back to the Spell Palace to be test subjects for whatever potion Zevon created? Shayla asked. Wandering. You know he'll be talking about the murderer for the next 2 weeks. Lachlan sighed. Unless you're in the mood to be a llama, or goat, or cow. Those were the easy options. If Maddie was the one throwing the vials, chances were they'd end up like Strat did during one of the face-offs between the casters and the angels. Flat on their backs, screaming their heads off. Not in the slightest. Shayla shook her head, and the 2 girls made their way through the aisle. Lachlan honestly had to wonder how she, Shayla, and Strat had gone from being one of the top angels to being lower than the scum on the bottom of Zevon's shoe. I mean, Shay was 4th in command of the angel after all, and Strat was 3rd, Lachlan thought. Now she and I are test subjects. At least it's better than Strat, who's basically become the Morgan of the casters now that Quinn's in Borodon. Still, it's better than the alternative. After all, even if the food was better, there was still a hierarchy among the Isle dwellers, and those without a gang fell lower than those in a gang. Lachlan would rather be a test subject to Zevon than a subject herself to a fling for foods like her sisters had done. Ah, welcome, ladies. Zevon said hours later as Sheila and Lachlan reluctantly made their way back to the Spell Palace. Where's Strat? Didn't you leave it with you? He's off having a fling somewhere, Sheila shrugged. He'll show up, Lachlan added. Oh, good. Zevon grinned as he pulled out some potions. He was no idiot. The two girls before him had jumped ship from the Rats to join the Angels, and he knew the only reason they joined the Casters was because there was no other choice. He might have had a fling with Sheila once upon a time, but that didn't mean he wanted to spend the rest of his life around her. Who wants to try out my new creations? Joy. How is it we did everything right, and yet it's the traitors and the murderers who get the rewards? Lachlan thought as their almost daily role as potions tester began anew. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, that was interesting, seeing the legume family dynamic. Oh boy, I liked that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.